Welcome to the Sacred Unweaving podcast with Holly Hope, embracing the beauty of perspective where we unravel sacred truths in order to weave a more embodied human experience. In this episode, we'll be diving into when we resist shedding parts of ourselves and when we place conditions on who we are and how that can block us from having deep unconditional love within. One of the greatest challenges as we open up to ourselves, we open up spiritual gifts, we open up who we're becoming, we're diving deep into who we've always been and understanding it, we can get into a state of judging ourselves or even creating expectations of ourselves to look, be, or act a certain way in the way we show up for other people. For me, I spent a lot of my life living up to the checklist, the master list of what I had been programmed and conditioned would mean I would have the guarantee of love. From being a good girl, looking a certain way, being a certain size, having the right number of children, having a spotless house. And I remember scrubbing my tile grout with a toothbrush with a newborn, just to make sure that I could measure up to these expectations. So as we're unweaving these conditions we place that create a personality, create a persona, create how we view ourselves and who we think we are, I can't help but unweave parts of myself of the past as well. And looking at where these constructs come from, these high levels of expectation that we hold on ourselves that I don't think any of us ever measure up to. It can create this feeling of always needing to be more, do more, have something of significance so that we can feel valued and loved. And especially when love comes to us, there can be this fear that sets in, because as soon as we feel love, we now have something to lose. What happens when we age? What happens when our body changes? What happens if we had a debilitating disease or lose a limb and we can no longer be and show up in that way? Will we still be loved? 11 years ago, when I found myself on the floor in my closet in the fetal position crying, begging God for death, that's when I realized I had placed so much of my worthiness on the actions I took. I can't help but feel the need to unweave and restructure where value comes from, where this love comes from, and this condition for love. Even if I look back years before when I got married, I can even see the constructs within my mind that said, if you have a marriage certificate, you will always have somebody who loves you and who's there for you. Now, I don't think any of us ever get married thinking it's not going to work out. However, I do think that many of us start a relationship, go into the relationship, go deeper into the relationship, give more, love more, shift ourselves more to be loved. And then we realize that we always knew something was off. There's always that hope that people will change and shift, that we'll be able to get what we want if we become better, if we become more. We can even encourage our partners to change and shift in the way we perceive that they need to, just because they love us. So let's deconstruct this love conditioning. Now, a lot of this is material that I do teach in our Sacred Energy Exchange course for couples. Felt it really important that I share it with you because for me, it was a life changer when I finally understood this piece. Love is a powerful force, and it is the frequency to understand and connect with all life itself. It's not just about a romantic relationship. It's about exchanging that blissful energy, appreciation, celebration for existence with not just people, but plants, the earth, and experiences we get to have, and especially things like tacos. In many cases, I've repurposed the word love for truth, because truth in the highest form is unconditioned love. So to create love, to make love, to expand love, and to receive limitless amounts of love, we must look at all the conditions we hold around love. Conditions of how we view our partners, how we view ourselves, our relationships, even the fabricated conditions we can still find ourselves responding to and reacting to. Unconditional love cannot be earned, cannot be measured. It just is because we are. That's it. Pure existence. Now, there's an exercise I really love doing when I explore if I am operating on a frequency of unconditional love or conditioned love. Unconditional love is just that, 0 conditions, which means if you no longer gave to me the way you're giving to me, if you no longer look the way you look, if you no longer act the way you act, do you still get love? Do I still give this blissful sensation of appreciation and gratitude for your existence? My favorite way to experience love, especially in relationships, is I love you just because. Now, many years ago, when I was newly married, for Valentine's Day, I went and got a whole bag of Hershey Kisses. I carefully removed the paper from each Hershey Kiss and had printed out 100 ways that I loved my husband, 100 reasons of why I chose into this relationship, 100 conditions that made him worthy of love. Now, at the time, I thought it was cute and romantic. I didn't realize that it was me talking myself into loving somebody and seeing that they're worthy of love so that they can feel loved. Here are all the reasons why I love you. That is conditioned love. Because if you remove any of those reasons, the love would be removed, right? Unconditional love says, even without all these conditions, I love you just because. The way I reframe myself many, many times when I feel like I'm in the loop of conditioned love is I envision a young little child, a niece, nephew, baby, grandbaby in my case. I envision their face, their bright eyes, their delicious, cute, squishy cheeks. And then I envision them breaking rules, not living up to my expectations, making messes, throwing a tantrum, all of the things that little ones do as they're learning to navigate their expressions. And then I envision them wanting a cookie. Big, bright eyes. Please, can I have a cookie? Please, Nana, can I have a cookie? Now, if I'm conditionally loving them, and me giving them a cookie is based on their behavior, I would make conditions of whether or not they get a cookie. However, unconditional love says, have the cookie just because I want to watch you celebrate the bliss of this deliciousness and experience your joy. That is unconditional love. There's conditions that we often put on love and whether or not we receive it and whether or not we give it. If we feel like there is shame around our abilities or our value of what we offer the world, that's going to filter all the love we receive through this judgment of whether or not it's worthy to be received. If it doesn't match, then we reject the love. We deflect the love. We make a joke. We roll our eyes. We break contact and connection. If we believe another will withhold their love if we don't perform well enough. If we've experienced abuse and pain from people who declared to love us. If we feel disconnected from ourselves and we don't feel like we can unconditionally love ourselves, all the parts, the messy parts, the parts that never measure up quite right, the parts that may have dirt in between the toes and a smile in our eyes. We can also condition our love if our parents had conditions, if we felt like anytime we got a reward, it was because it was earned and not just blissfully given, like the cookie. We may feel completely distracted with love, focused on tasks and objects and doing so that we'll get love, but then we never take the time to actually feel it. So some of the things that I've utilized to clear the programming of love is to ask myself what I was taught about love when I was young. Was I taught that love hurts? Because yes, I was. So when people hurt me, I didn't see it as they didn't love me, but I actually thought of it as they did love me because they're hurting. Marriages were meant to have fights. The push and the pull of do you still love me and go away and come back was my normalcy when it came to love and what I learned. So of course it's what I experienced. So it helps us if we look at the types of love we're experiencing and mapping those patterns to our ancestors, to our parents, to our past relationships. Because unconditional love doesn't have any of that stuff I was programmed with. Now, with unconditional love, it's also what charges us and gives us strength as we do shadow work, as we go into the descent. Now, when I talk about descending, I'm talking about getting to the bottom core of your being or the bottom core of your programs. We hear a lot of conversation from awakened beings and people who are moving towards enlightenment that you want to ascend and love and light and go higher and reach out more and expand your consciousness, connect with everything. But we forget that in order to ascend and raise up, we must first descend. And that's that spiral down to the core. Once we get to the core of who we are, the raw conditions fade away. The raw self is there. And whatever that raw human looks like is so deliciously perfect. But if we don't allow ourselves to get down to that core, we can allow trauma to get in our way, or we can sideline and bypass this deep, sometimes painful and erupting sensation of going to the deep core of understanding why and the perspectives and the beliefs that we took on and even who we thought we were. Now, anytime we have this powerful activation that I see a lot in my work, there's this unraveling of the old self, which means the unraveling of the old self in order to make room for the new self, to make room for a new form that's birthing and emerging. But that old self, we got pretty used to them. They knew what they wanted. They knew what they didn't want. They had plenty of backup of experiences and trauma stories to justify behaviors and perspectives. And for many of us, that's who we made ourselves to be. I'm so grateful that I had a moment where my entire construct of my life shattered into tiny little debris pieces because it meant that I had nothing left to hold on to of that old version of me. There was nothing. And the more we can get into the state of nothingness, then we go into what I call the womb of no thing. The place where we're pregnant with all the possibilities and potentials. When we think of shadow work, shadow is the dark, and within the dark is where all the colors lie, where all the possibilities lie, piled on top of one another, and it can feel a lot like static. If you're watching TV and the whole static screen, for those of you that remember that from our TV days, everything's fuzzy. Right? You have dark, you have light, you have all these different shades of gray going on. In the womb of no thing, you have all the colors. You have all the possibilities. You have all the fragments of light that are deconstructed. So when you descend, you're deconstructing, you're unraveling, you're shedding everything. It doesn't mean that you can't use those pieces later. It means you let go of them completely. As I mentor so many beautiful practitioners in healing work, one of the common threads I see is this: I'm shedding everything and I'm descending. What's the world going to think of the new version I build? And we begin building new versions of us. And I've seen this in a lot of healing work where new versions are built, but the world doesn't receive it as well. And usually that's the case when we haven't let go of that old self and we're trying to shove this new version into an old form. But when we love what is, we find limitless beauty in those dark depths. Because when you get to the core, you see your heart. You see your pure soul essence. You don't see a nose. You don't see the pain of the past. You don't see that one relationship that I knew was a bad idea and I chose to anyways. None of that exists and none of that matters because you're going into the space of all, where everything is. And when everything's there, there isn't the scrutinizing perspective to say, I need to fixate on this one regret, this one piece of my past that I dislike, this one personality trait. You're allowing your whole self to deconstruct and go into a big old pot together. And then when you sit there for a moment, that's where the unconditional love gets to be present because there are no conditions anymore. You've removed them all. And then you begin to build as you ascend, as you rise. You know, we talk about descending, that's the heavy dropping down. And once you let go of everything, your load is so light. Your expectations are so low. Not low in a low vibrational state, but they're no longer limited by the expectations that can constrict you. When we expect ourselves to show up a certain way, often we limit ourselves because we'll only meet the standards that we can see. But when we allow ourselves to simply expand, then we're able to surprise ourselves with how we show up. One of my favorite quotes that I utilize all the time is, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. When we allow ourselves to shed into this deconstruct, we're allowing ourselves to see the raw pieces and then create something new from those pieces. Or perhaps adding in brand new pieces and new upgrades. And then we'll experience that being for a while. And then when we feel called, we descend again and we shed again, and then we rebirth again. This is why to be a human that is embodied is to let yourself die and be reborn many times. Because if we still operate the same, if we only love ourselves with specific conditions, then what we're doing is we're creating monotony. We're being the same every single day, which doesn't allow growth. It doesn't allow expansion. Now, what happens when we get down to those depths or we're on our way and we start to see things that we don't love? How do we see the beauty in those dark depths? I was recently in a magical fairy forest in the mountains, and while there, I had a delicious conversation with a very galactic alien being who is a 3D person, but also resonates at a language and a frequency that is different from mine. Unconditionally, I can celebrate this person and celebrate me at the same time, even though we differ. I begin talking about personas and energies I play with within myself, past lives and soul DNA creation. It was definitely a conversation of vocabulary beyond daily conversation. I shared this version of this old hag, this Baba Yaga version of me, with faces that are distorted from slipping in cracks and timelines, gnarly knuckles, even a drawing low voice that was kind of creepy. He looked at me very shocked. Why wouldn't you choose something positive? Why would you connect with that persona? And my response, of course, was, why do you see that persona as not positive? When we unravel ourselves, when we allow ourselves to descend, we release so many limitations on how we show up and also on the expectations of what beauty looks like. I later went on to explain that the beauty of her is that she no longer needs external beauty, but she stands in her strength and her power with wisdom, maybe some calloused humor, and some raw, direct, loving fiercely. He invited me to change the way I see her in my mind, and I declined. She is beautiful to me. And when you can see that, then you might be able to see all of me. It's about loving what is. And even when things aren't positive and perfect, even when we feel really frustrated that things haven't turned out, or our hearts are heavy with grief, frustration, hurt, all the negative emotions that call us to retract inside and dive deeper down in our descent. We can acknowledge it, validate it, and then find the bright side. Find the piece that is now illuminated, whether that's wisdom, whether that's discernment and seeing who our true connections are, who are those who actually love us unconditionally. Or we can see who needs to go and who needs to shed so that we can grow and expand and magnetize those people towards us. It is my hope, my prayer, that you've been able to connect in with loving yourself unconditionally a little deeper, that you feel a little braver to dive into the depths. This has been a Sacred Unweaving podcast with Holly Hope. Feel free to find more information on the podcasts, beautiful guests that we've had on the show, and the services and immersive healing retreats at thebeautyofperspective.com.